but you had to spend so much money where now even $100 starter bass is so precise,
Yeah, so much better.
so good sounding because of the technology in finishes, like I said, in drying of the woods, even the crap metal that they put on beginner instruments is still better quality than like mid or top level metal of the 50s. You
It's
know, in certain regards, steel was of a different, nature back then. It was a lot more pure. Um,
kind of like
but
computers. Like you can walk around with something that is way more. It's way better than anything we would have ever used back when they first started.
the first, what was it? It was the first 256 megabyte hard drive used to have to be transported by a 747. Like, it was crazy. It's crazy. But yeah, so just that the overall technology, right? The hardness of the metals, the purity of the metals, and then the invention of the internet where everyone can just go and troll everyone else about how, this product, that product, how this spec is better than that spec. And then all these companies morphed out of the evolution of the internet and that spreading of the knowledge, right? Um, so, and then on top of all of that, I know a dude who plays cello in in orchestras, and he would tell me stories about spending $400 on a set of strings for his cello and his upright basses. And like he would buy some like 200-year-old strings,
Yeah,
right? And I'm sure, yeah, that has a sound to it, but nowadays they pump strings out,
yeah,
right? The invention of adding a truss rod in so we can have these really tense, tight strings.
yeah.
And then what quality those metals are made out of. Again, we have all of these phosphor bronze, we have steel core, we have hex core, we have round core, we have round wound, we have flat wound.
Semi flat wound.
Yeah, yeah, right. um
And we'll
and
definitely. Oh, go ahead.
no, go.
Well, we're gonna get into a lot more of that in another episode, but it's true.
Yeah,
There's.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Don't worry.
But yeah, so and then the other thing what you said too, is analog versus digital, right? We went from tube to solid state, and then we went from back to tube, and then now we're in not just solid state, but we have like IR, right? Impulse response. And that's so important. That's the elitist move now. It's not even just having the latest quality in digital equipment, but now it's having, the most accurate sound because going as we've discussed several times on this so far, going from yesteryear's sound to today's sound, we the process is different and we do lose information and you don't get the same sounds going from a tube amplifier or a solid state amplifier versus through an Axe-Fx or GT1000 or a Kemper.
Yeah,
It is different and impulse response really matters.
yeah.
And then on top of that, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s happened. And nowadays we don't just like either pluck or slap. There's tapping, with the slapping. There's hammer-ons, pull-offs. So again, we adding in the frets to the bass, we get all of these techniques that are just more easily available to pull off live. And being an electric bass versus a stand-up bass, right? We get to move around.
Mhm.
If you look at the video footage of me, I'm all over the stage. You know how much harder that would be if I had an upright, like
Yeah,
um
we both have like this crazy stage presence where we're on one side of the stage and we're on the other side of the stage, and yeah, we can't really. You can't do that with a stand-up
I
bass.
mean, don't get me wrong. I would whip that thing around you know, like
So,
nobody's business, but
but
um
even even like this guy, I mean, this guy's heavy, you know, and I've played 3 4 hour shows with this one, and it hurts your back. Like you have to make sure that you're in shape as well.
Right, and that's another addition to technology in the bass because back in the day, finishes and the woods and everything used to be so heavy, right?
Mhm.
Guitars and basses, everything used to be so heavy. My
Yeah,
five strings, these two five strings that I have that I use when I play for Nita, I had Ibanez BTB five string that I used to play in other bands, and with the finish on it, it was so heavy, and it was only 10 years older. You know,
yeah,
these they don't have much finish on them other than like the clear, right? And the other one just had this thick, transparent green on
yeah.
it. And I'll tell you, that makes your bases so heavy.
The
And
pain.
even this, like, and the addition to longer scale like this is a 35-inch scale where Fender basses were a smaller scale. And then once bands started not only getting louder, right, they also started tuning down further and further and further. And the bass had to go with it. And with these short scale basses, unless we want strings this big around, we need to make that scale longer. So that added technology as well. And again, with the planing of the woods, with the qualities of the woods, that allowed for the bass to evolve alongside the needs of current music.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um,
Not recording analog, I can give you about 500 reasons. But do I miss analog? I do. I'll just say that, I think ever since we went digital, all we keep doing is trying to get back to the same place where we left off with, which was with analog. But with that being said, I think it's just more time efficient, easier on artist budgets. Sonically, I'm getting probably better sounds than I used to. I would say over the last few years, I've been at 96K since I started in digital, other than working on like digital tape machines like the Sony 3324 or like, D88s and stuff like that back when we first started switching over. But I think with the way the budgets are, there it's just not, doesn't make any sense to go to 2 inch anymore. My old room in Louisiana with Brady at Blade Studios, we had a system called Clasp, where I could run a 2 inch reel in between the desk and the Pro Tools rig, so you could cap. It's kind of like a giant tape machine plug-in, but a real tape machine, which was great. I mean, because then we would only need like 2 to 3 reels for a whole record. Just keep using it till it wears out. The last record I did on all analog was Brian Blade's record, Landmark's record. It was a jazz record. We did all the 2 inch track to or mix to half inch, and it did sound amazing. But I mean, a lot of that is the players. But sonically, I thought it was a really great sounding record, and it did get nominated for a Grammy. So there is something to be said for that. But that was the last all tape record I did. I mean, I think now with the higher sample rates and good clocking on a nice rig with good converters, I think. I mean, I don't think it's gonna hurt anything. I think we've come to a point now where I'm pretty satisfied with the mixes and the quality I'm getting off of the digital rig. I thought I would never say that, but um, I think we're fine. You know.
yeah. So I was watching a YouTube video a few months ago when we were brainstorming about this episode and talking about like how the bass, basically what our brains, how our brains react towards bass and why we like bass so much. And there's
Right.
this YouTube channel called The Verge. In 2015, they put out this video. basically talks about why we love bass and music so much. And they link it to cognitive science that basically, um, in the womb, when we are first, you know, made, and our life evolving, and we're coming to be a little baby. We are in the womb, and when we develop our sense of audible, we start listening to the mother's heartbeat, and we start listening to the swishing of the water and the liquid that's inside and of the mother's womb, and then everything is muffled. Her voice and everyone around it is all muffled. So we're already linked at the beginning of our life to low frequency.
And even throughout, I get very, very crazy on this particular subject of
Yeah.
frequencies, because even the hum of the earth
Mm-hmm.
as it travels through space and it transcends into our feet, and that vibration, and
Mm-hmm.
when a car goes by and we don't necessarily hear it, or a truck or a train, and we feel it,
Mm-hmm.
that's a different form of haptic feedback.
Yeah.
Right? It's when we have low frequencies, it doesn't just go to our ear,
Mm-hmm.
it goes to our whole body, and we're able
Yeah.
to perceive it
Cat purr.
throughout, yeah, throughout all extremities.
Yeah.
You know, you can't always hear a guitar solo with your hands, but you can always hear the bass solo with your hands, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when cats purr, they're actually emitting a healing frequency.
I
Um,
get, yeah, I get very crazy on this subject. This would be a 17-hour video if I was allowed to talk about frequencies right
yeah. This video basically says that it changes our adrenaline and our heart rate.
now. Right.
And that's why we're able to identify with it so much. And you know, the bass line is the structure of that the melody hangs upon, right? So if we're listening to a drum beat and we're trying to listen to the bass line, it's actually moving us, and we don't even realize it. It's moving our just cognitively. We're in the middle of it,
We can
and
scientifically say that just the low frequencies, because of how powerful they are and how much we amplify them, right?
yeah,
That's why they're so powerful, because we amplify them at shows and stuff. Um,
yeah,
Anybody who's ever been on YouTube and seen any of those videos about the vibrating plates with the sand, like, or
oh
salt rather,
yeah,
vibrating plates with the salt, and they change the frequency on the frequency generator, and it makes all these different shapes.
yeah,
If you take into account just the fact that we have salt in our bloodstream,
yeah,
that you have to realize that it's going to dance like jumping beans inside of us
yeah.
in reaction to
Oh
certain frequencies.
yeah, water as well. You know,
Yeah, yeah, we're all fluid.
as the earth moves, the water is moving, and we're made of water. It's all connected there. So yeah, so since we're babies, we are connected to this. But isn't that weird though? How the for a long time we haven't really connected with it until as of recent years, though. We haven't really connected with bass.
I think in different forms, right? Like a lot of those guttural tribal
Mhm.
singers, right? They really get
Yeah,
down. You know, like they're focusing on that same particular energy, I think.
right.
Yeah, and there's very many biblical stories about the Jewish tribes chanting and singing in the sands, and the sands in the deserts changing around them and
Yeah.
changing shapes. I
Did you?
guarantee. All right, everybody. So here's Tommy Victor from Prong and Danzig here to answer some of our bass questions. First one here, man, is when I was on the road with you, you told me that like at one point all members of Prong were bass players, and that you started playing bass first, and now you seem to play a lot of guitar. And we noticed that, at least I've noticed that most of the time it's guitar players switch to bass out of necessity, but you're a bass player who switched to guitar out of necessity. So I wanted to get into that and see if being a bass player first and then moving to guitar, if that influenced any of your riffage and anything else you had to expand upon on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, concentrating on single notes and playing along with a kick drum with a drummer you're locked in as a rhythm section. I don't think a lot of guitar players experience it as much as a bass player does. And so when I switched to guitar, I mean, I was still in that framework of playing with the drummer, you know, and just listening to this kick drum and working off his patterns, and vice versa. Like it came from a more percussive mentality, and just strictly rhythm with the guitar, you know, like I wasn't concerned with solos. I didn't have a chance. I moved right from bass into playing guitar. I mean, I fiddled around with guitar here and there, but I never really learned that much. I mean, so solos, I've been faking solos since I started. I mean, it's just been like, you know, any bullshit I can come up with and make it sound like it's real is
play it as fast as you can and move around as quick as you can and yank the whammy bar.
Yeah, and it's worked, you know, which is crazy, you know, and you know, that's why a lot of times I almost make fun of guys that use a wah-wah pedal so much. I'm like, that's just, you know, that's copying up for your inefficiencies or whatever, but that's not really that true. But no, I mean, that's how PRONG started, was like having a bass player fix the guitar, created that sound. Like this whole groove metal thing really came from
right.
From
yeah, you're the riff beast, right?
Yeah, it's
you're
just
the riff
riffs.
beast.
I mean, I wasn't concentrating. I mean, solos were an afterthought. In fact, when our first demo, there was no solos on it. And then we were like, well, we wanted to be crossover. We just didn't want to be a hardcore band. We wanted to cross into some metal. So after I figured out how to fake solos, we went in and overdubbed some guitar solos on it. So yeah, in fact, we had 3 bass players, wanting to form this band. And it was like, we were writing songs, and I was like, who's going to play guitar? And we were going to have 2 basses. This other guy was going to switch. He left. So then we went down to this power trio format. Mike, the original member that we formed the band with, bass player, he goes, I'll play bass, you play guitar. He goes, you look like you're playing pretty well. And it's like, I was like, okay, fine. And the thing is, when
what was the first thing that you did? Did you already know like a power chord shape?
Yeah, I knew bass? Power chords. That's about it, really. You know, I knew some power chords. The pinch harmonic thing that, you know, I've been noted for, I don't know how that came about. I mean, it may be from something on the bass where I, you know, plucking the strings really hard. And the fact that for years, since I'm 11 years old, playing these heavier strings and then moving to lighter strings, I was like, well, this is easy. I mean, I was like, playing guitar in my mind, it was easy at first because it was like I didn't have to struggle that much. So
right, everything was smaller. The strings were easier to push down.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe they're false harmonics, and you know, I've always used heavier guitar strings than your average guy, but you know, like that came about by accident. I mean, trying to emulate like some ZZ Top or something, you know. But
right, if I'm not mistaken, aren't your guitar strings? It's like the highs are a set of 11s and like the lows are a set of like 10s or something.
It's 56 to 11.
56. Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, word.
So
Yeah. It's a little. They're beefy. They're definitely beefy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Not on all tunings though. Yeah, not on all tunings. So, but you know, anything detuned, I got to go that low. Otherwise, it's just too much wobble. But back to bass. So, you know, making that transition was it was a cool thing. I mean, you know, it was a lot of fun at first, and now I feel bad. Like I was because I'm so uneducated on guitar, and like because we're in the pandemic, and I was like, you know, I've been listening to a lot of classic rock, so I went online, and this guy had figured out the 100 best, what he thought best guitar riffs in rock of all time, and this guy's just going through from Yes to Rush to Zeppelin and just bashing out one after, made a whole medley of 100. I'm like, I can't play any of these fucking songs because I never learned how to play guitar really.
Right.
You know, like I learned on the road. I learned like, you know, just whatever, watching, and I never really learned how to play cover songs. You know, it's like playing guitar with Danzig, and a lot of these songs I didn't have anything to do with the original recording is weird too. But you know, it's just making my own music and writing my own stuff. Playing bass was like, it was integral to the sound of PRONG. And, you know,
Yeah,
later on.
it definitely
writing
made that
songs
band
too.
heavy, I think.
Yeah. You know, and then I was able to write some of the bass lines and go, you know what, dude, like play this.
Right.
And like guys are like, you know, like, you know, like to snap your fingers, snap your neck. I mean, that's like a bass song, really. I
Yeah,
mean,
it is.
you know what I mean? It's like that bass riff, like that I wrote was really on the bass, but you know, it's so a lot of it was cool with that. I mean, it's a key element to my career is like playing bass, and I still really enjoy playing bass. Like I played on the last couple of Danzig records, and you know, it's like it's been a fun ride. But now I feel like, you know, like I'm a really shitty guitar player. So on the other hand, it has its duality to the whole thing, and I almost feel like a shitty bass player because I missed out years of even playing that much, you know. So
You have seen some of the best bassists play live. You've sat down to dinner with them. You probably have their numbers on your phone.
No,
So
I've deleted all the evidence.
So being a bass player, I wanted to kind of expand with you on what who you think the best bassist is out there. Who do you think is the reigning champ?
Well, it's such a loaded question because, look, for me, the importance of each individual member of a band is about what the band's message is or what the band's sound is, right? I mean, that's, you know, you could go back and look at Zeppelin and think, okay, John Paul Jones, probably one of the greatest bass players to ever walk the face of the earth, right? But it's because of what he did in that band, you know, and how he filled every gap that he needed to fill, but never overplayed. His bass playing was so melodic. He was very McCartney-esque in the melodies, you know, that he would play, right? But he wasn't singing. He kept himself busy playing keyboards and doing everything else that he was doing, you know, on those records. And he was a great writer, still is. But then I look at guys that are much less credited as great bass players, like Dennis Dunaway from Alice Cooper. Dennis Dunaway may be the greatest bass player that's ever recorded bass parts on records because he's completely unique. There's, in all the years of listening and all the music I listen to, I can't tell you that there's another guy that plays like Dennis Dunaway does. You know, he's completely on his own planet. And that, to me, is probably the thing that makes bass players great. You know, I mean, Billy Sheehan is a great bass player, right? Hands down, probably the most proficient bassist that's ever had mainstream success, right? If you were to look at it that way. But is Billy the greatest bass player on the planet? I don't know. Some people don't like the way he plays, you know, other people love it because he's a shred guy and that's what they love. But for me, it's never been about shred. It's been about what's right for the band. You know, Cliff Williams from AC/DC may be the greatest bass player on the planet because he only plays what is absolutely necessary for those songs. And live and on the records, he is the foundation of everything. He and the drummer, Phil Rudd, there's just no more solid rhythm section. Of course, Malcolm's part of that too, but those guys, you can't knock those guys because he just plays a straight bass part. You know, that's what he does, what the bass was intended for, which is hold down the bottom. Dusty Hill from ZZ Top is the same, you know. I mean, Dusty plays some badass grooves on those records, you know, and it's nothing complicated. It's not over the top crazy, but man, could you imagine ZZ Top with anything else? You know what I mean? It just doesn't add up. So I guess it's all about how, you know, Ian Hill from Judas Priest, he's another guy. I think Ian Hill has the greatest gig in rock and roll ever. I mean, he has a 3-foot box on the stage that he stands in for the most part. He just throws down every night. And when you see them live, there's a lot more going on with Ian's bass playing than you hear on the records, and until more recently, I think, right? But Ian is just, you know, the other thing about a lot of those guys is they're just the nicest guys in the world, you know, and that's the other thing that I love about my life and the experience that I've had, I've gotten to work for a lot of bands that I grew up listening to. And I have to say that I've never really been disappointed by any of the people that I grew up, putting on a pedestal as a young musician or as just a music fan, So I'm fortunate in that world. I've had other people that I didn't care for at all anyway, kind of live up to exactly what I was expecting. But it's so nice when you get into that world and you see these guys that just, when they step on stage, it's perfect. So they don't have to play a lot of notes. They don't have to be, tapping and, slapping and popping and, whatever else. It's what's right for the song, and what's right for the band. I mean, could you imagine AC/DC with Billy Sheehan playing bass? It'd be idiotic, So I think it's just about what's right, for the sound. And that's not for any of us to decide, that's for us to listen to and go, yeah, I get that,
Yeah, exactly. That was a trick question. You don't know who the best bassist is because everyone has their own opinion on it. And there's so much there with technique, and then there's so much just being a solid bassist. The best bassist would be somebody that is just solid, who plays the parts well and you can hang with and goes well with the band. And it's different for every band. So
yeah, and it's key in this business. I mean, we talk about this a lot, and I know that you and I have had this discussion over the years too. It's not always about, you don't have to be the best to have this job, right? You just have to be the right person for this situation. And that's the same in the crew world. It's the same in, in the band and musician world. But there are those people that do stand out. And there's those guys that have had different successes in different parts of the business, whether it's live or recording or whatever, where they shine,
So we're going to do the first position here in D major. That means that I'm going to be starting this pattern on the D note, which in this particular case is on the 10th fret of the E string, right? That's a D. So now I'm going to do this pattern, which is going to be 10, 12, 14, 10, 12, 14, 11, 12. And that's one octave. Now, I like to do this pattern 3 notes per string. You just have to know where you're going to end and where you're going to begin. 1 octave, all right? And I like to do it like this. And when you do that, you get a nice rhythm when you get 3 notes per string. Now, from our root of the D, we're going to move down a step and a half, which means we're going to go down 3 notes. And we are now on the 7th fret of the E string. I have a 5-string bass, so do not get confused. So we're going to go 7, 9, 10. 7, 9, 10, 7, 9. And that's 1 octave. Again, I like to do this pattern 3 notes per string, so it's going to be 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 10, 7, 9, 11, 7, 9, 11.
whoa.
Right. Yeah. Why can I play that fast? Because I've played it 9 million times.
So
Not because
really-
it's my first time playing it. And can I get better? Absolutely. That's why I
Absolutely.
practice every day.
So what you're doing there is you're taking your major scale and you're just extending more notes on either side of the scale to fit the neck and fit.
Yeah, it's the 3
each-
notes per string pattern. Right. No matter what instrument I'm playing, whether it's a 4-string bass, a 5-string bass, a 6-string bass, it does change. If you're tuning, all right, this is for the nerds out there. If you tune your 6-string bass to the high note to a C, these patterns are a little bit different, but I tune my 6-string bass, the high note, to a B, just like it would be on a guitar.
Right.
So I
They
use
work.
the same patterns
Mhm.
going from bass to guitar. I didn't know when I got my first 6-string that you would tune that high string to a C. I didn't know. No one told me. It didn't
Yeah.
come with a manual on how to tune it. So
Yeah.
I just tuned it how my guitar was tuned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a big thing. Now here, I want to talk about, I am sitting right now. I don't have a standing shot here, and we will do other stuff with that where we show good posture with standing. Maybe we'll do a whole episode on different postures for different instruments. But I am making sure to keep my hand flat here. And a big thing that I talk about all the time is my pivoting on my thumb. Now, every time I approach these scales, I'm keeping my thumb right behind my fingers. So if my hands move down, so does my thumb. So when I run through those scales, you can be rest assured my thumb is right here at all times. And I split the difference. When I play that major scale, 3 notes per string, my thumb is basically right behind my middle finger. So that way, even when I'm using my pinky all the way up here, I have my thumb basically right behind the 12th fret, allowing my pinky to also have some use. So it's not just the pinky working. Everything is always that finger and my thumb. That is a major thing that I wish that I knew.
Yeah, you don't want to see the thumb coming up over the neck so much, because you lose this part of your hand when you're trying to play notes. I have pretty big hands for a girl. I definitely have big hands, but I do have a little bit of reach. But the problem is that your joints don't bend any more than what they do. So
Right. And once we get these techniques down, we can afford to be a little bit lazier. Like I will be caught with my thumb up here when it shouldn't
yeah,
be. That's
yeah.
only because I've focused so much and built up the strength already.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. But it is important to make sure that you're articulating the notes properly. So that means that you need as much finger length as possible to reach those notes. Especially, I mean, the bass neck is typically a little bit bigger than the guitar neck. So now it doesn't mean that because you have small hands that you can't play a bass, you can't play a guitar. That's completely not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that you have to make sure that your hands are given the opportunity to hit the notes properly.
Absolutely. And so that is a lot with my left hand technique, right? Is mainly focusing on the thumb and where that is, right?
Yeah.
And when I'm doing that major scale too, and this is no pick, but when I'm doing the major scale, again, I'm keeping my thumb where my middle finger is. And even though this is a big stretch, when I go 10, 12, 14, that's a big stretch. But what I'm doing is I'm centering around where my middle finger is, and then I'm reaching back a little bit for the 10, centering on the 12, and then reaching up a little bit for the 14. What most people do is they'll have their thumb behind their index finger, and then they'll have to reach up for the 12 and then reach up again for the 14. And the reason why that is such a hard thing to do is your thumb is now all the way over here,
Yep.
and you're trying to do this move,
Yeah.
and you don't have that dexterity yet. So you got to split the difference. So it's easier to just reach back a little bit, center, reach up a little bit, then be all the way back here with our thumb, and then reach up and then reach up again. You know, like you don't have that strength.
Don't be afraid to start on your middle finger if you're doing a run. I mean, a lot of people, they think, oh, first note, start on your index finger. Don't be
When I
afraid to
learned-
start on a different finger.
When I do the major scale, I'll do the major scale now again in D in a standard position.
Yeah.
Up.
Yeah.
I start that with my middle finger when I do that in a standard position.
Right.
And I do that with all the pentatonic scales. If it starts like that and I need to have this finger here, I will start with
Pick
my
up the
middle
third.
finger on that scale. But again,
If
I
you're-
like to learn.
Yeah. If you're picking up a third or a flat fourth or something, yeah, you need that extra finger back there.
I also like to play the notes, the scales 3 notes per string, because my favorite interval end Killian's is the ninth. And that means that when you play the major scale or the minor scale, it would be the ninth note in this pattern. So right here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And
Just
that
run it
sound
from
that
the
you get for the
octave.
ninth is right.
Beautiful. It is right up from the octave. It's not. It's what a whole step from the octave, so it's not that far from it.
Right.
It's just you're extending that scale, and that's why it's important to
A
learn.
ninth is just an octave of the second,
Yeah, exactly.
which in both cases of the major and the minor scale is a very neutral note.
Yeah, yeah. So that's why it's important to know your scales front to back and how they extend and come back.
Now, another thing that I mentioned is that we've talked a lot about in a couple of these episodes is where you want your thumb to be. And I happen to have these soap bar pickups. So I always get myself a good posture. I'll move so you can see. Now, if I'm standing up, I'll drop this down here.
Yeah.
If I'm standing up, I'm going to keep myself fairly straight. When I'm playing, you're going to notice that I'm going to be a little bit more bent. This will eventually lead to some form of irritation. So you might just have to drop your leg down if you're going to be playing.
Yeah, I find that when I play guitar, like acoustic guitar, or I play bass sitting down, my forearms just start really aching.
Yeah, I was showing one of my students. You could see. If I had the sailor lady, she'd be dancing right now with her hula.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you're doing that, you're getting a lot more fatigue because you have these harsh angles. When you straighten out,
It's a
you
lot
don't
less
get
harsh.
as much of the harsh angle, and you're not extending the ligaments and then moving the action. They're relaxed and then actioning.
Yeah.
Not extended and then actioning.
Excuse
That
me.
has a lot to do with how your fatigue will be. So one awesome thing that I'm going to have to read this off of here, but just watch my right hand. This is Killian's exercise. So I'm going to do this on the E string, open E string. And we have our 1, our 2, and then our 3. Oh, there we go. So our first finger, our second finger, and our third finger. And so this pattern is going to be 3, 2, 1, 3. So, all right. So that's the first part of the pattern, and there's 3 parts. So it's 3, 2, 1, 3, and then 2, 1, 3, 2. So 3, 2, 1, 3, and 2, 1, 3, 2. And then the last part of the pattern is 1, 3, 2, 1. And if you work on those three gallops, it's an astonishing right hand technique. Now, Killian uses all 10 fingers. All right. There's no lie. When that dude plays his bass, he's like,
Yeah.
I can't even believe the stuff that he does, whether it's bass or guitar. He does amazing thumping, tapping, slapping, popping, finger picking, strumming chords, everything. It's so crazy, all the stuff that he can do. But I've used this technique now for a few of my students. I play with the pick, so I don't work on it that much for myself. I'm a pick player. I do this sometimes to keep myself, but I also learn how to just keep it going, right? And I could hear that I was a little not even, so I have to learn how to pull myself down, right?
More of a gallop, yeah.
Yeah, and bring yourself down.
Yeah.
It's really, really, really important stuff.
Yeah.
I'm so happy that we're able to give little lessons here.
I know. This is
great.
what I was really looking forward to, is being able to share the lessons that'll really cut through the red tape, and get people to
and so
break out of their box.
these are the main points that I think that we should focus on.
Yeah.
Everything else that we'll cover, from how to hold a pick, what strings to use, how to tune, all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah, there's a whole segment we can do, or the whole thing we could do about pick versus fingers too. So,
And everybody, just know we're just starting off. This is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. This is
all
so
kinds
great.
of stuff we can talk about.
4th episode in, we're already doing lessons. Who would have thought we'd be
Yay.
able to do this, right? To finish off, and I'm going to do all of these in the example of D. All right. So whatever you'll see me doing from here on out will be an example of it. But the major scale is our first anchoring point that we want to drill over and over. We want to go. The reason why we want to do that is because out of the 7 diatonic modes, 3 of those modes are major. If we want to play the Lydian mode, and what I mean by major is they use what's called a major third. So that means that our third note is 2 full steps away. All right? Our third note in this pattern is 2 steps away. So it makes it major because that's just called a major third. If you don't know, it is. So the Lydian mode is just the major mode with a raised fourth. So a Lydian mode would be, we changed 1 note. The Mixolydian mode would be the same as the major, except we would have a flat 7th. So it'd be like this. That's it. Now you know all 3 of those modes because you drilled that major mode over and over.
What is the major also called as a mode?
Ionian. The Ionian.
Ionian, Mixolydian, and
I did Ionian and then Lydian and then Mixolydian. I did them in their modal order.
yeah.
The other mode is that we're going to drill over and over is the minor mode. Again, I'm going to do this in the key of D. Relative to that major would be the key of B, but I'm doing it over here. So, so we have D minor. It is D minor because I'm starting it on the D note, which is the 10th fret on the E string. Before we did it over here. Right? So now we're doing it over here. Same pattern. If we want to play another one of the modes, let's say the Phrygian mode, we would play the same pattern except the second note is going to get flattened. So our pattern is now to play the Phrygian mode. Now reset ourselves back to the minor mode. Now, if we want to play the Dorian mode, which would be the second mode of the diatonic modes right after the major, we're going to play the same exact thing as the minor mode, except we're going to raise the 6th note up 1/2 step. Sorry. There we go. Boom. The only other mode left is the most difficult, and it's the Locrian mode. And the reason why it's the most difficult is because now we have to move 2 notes, as opposed to every other time when we only had to move 1. And now Locrian, we are going to move the second note of the minor scale down, and we're also going to move the 5th note down, both by a 1/2 step. So now our pattern is this. Done.
Ta-da.
That's all 7 diatonic modes.
Also,
all
the
based
minor
on
is called. The minor is called what? Also.
Oh, and the minor is called Aeolian, right?
There
So
you go.
our diatonic mode order, by the little anagram that I like to use, is I don't pick lemons my aunt likes. That means Ionian or major, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian or minor, Locrian, and then it repeats.
Mm-hmm.
So the major and the minor, they have 2 different names, but that's major is Ionian, Aeolian is minor.
Yeah, it's not hard to remember them.
If you remember those orders, that's half the battle, right? But really all you have to do is just know where a major is. If you're playing anywhere, that you just, if you find your major, if you find where the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, if you find out where that is in a song, then you just go down a 1.5 steps, and now you play your minor pattern.
Yay! I hope somebody learned something from that. That's awesome.
They better.
Yeah, all right. This is the basics of the basics, but this is very, very important. So if you don't know this already, then this is, you just need to watch this over and over and get it down.
Sorry. All right. So number one, what is the right hand technique that you relied on the most, and as well as the left hand technique for when it came to playing bass in specific?
So when I was a little younger, I had a little bit of a playing injury scare. And I went back to the drawing board and I saw a player named Gary Willis. And he gave me this technique. I cannot recommend Gary Willis enough, but of raising your elbow for technical music. The reason why this is for the right hand specific answer, is that when you have your elbow raised up, when you're doing technical things, your wrist is straight, versus where you see a lot of fusion guys, they do what I call raptor claw. And that can lead to a lot of strain issues here because you're technically like giving an obstacle between where the energy is being transferred. So that was a big one. And then on top of that was my 3-finger technique, which was from Billy Sheehan, which I was very fortunate enough to like do some work with him. And it's basically 3-2-1-3, 2-1-3-2, 1-3-2-1 technique to break up the gallop.
Now, and you do that, it's 12 notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Broken into a movement of 3 fingers separated 4 notes at a time.
Exactly. So
right.
That between those two things are the biggest things for my right hand that have helped me. I will say this, as much as the breaking the 4-note pattern, I really try and give all my students injury prevention. Try and raise your elbow. If you ever feel strain, try and correct things your body feels. Your body is always telling you if it's straining yourself. And I play a lot of technical, crazy music. So like stuff like that. So if you're playing a lot of crazy stuff, don't ever do like this, try and raise your elbow. So that's for that. For my left hand, it's much more simple.
Real quick, before we get there, how do you position your right hand? Now, I have a very, I don't know, I just look into this a lot. I'm very intrigued about this. But now, you play so many things and you move so fluently with your fingers.
Thank you.
Do you ever do 4 fingers?
I do for 4-note patterns on my low string. So let's say if like I'm playing an abiotic song, go but it's one end, one end, one end. Then I'll do like a flurry, like a flamenquilla.
Yeah. Now, when you do that, how are you positioning yourself? Because all 4 fingers, right, for new players, right, all 4 fingers are different heights. So when I do 3-finger patterns, I have to shorten up my middle finger a lot. You know what I mean?
No.
To match, and then to match my pinky, I would have to shorten them up even more.
Yeah, so I only use 4 fingers for bursts. So that's very specific. So let's pretend my finger is a string. So if I'm going, so I will raise and angle my hand.
Right, yeah, you're angling your hand to bring it, right.
Well, when I do 3, I try and do what Billy Sheehan does, is that I try and level up everything. So 4 is that I'm doing a burst and coming down like it's an angled burst, but with 3, when I'm doing like 30-second notes, it's like that. But that is a very good question, because a lot of people, like, I do use my pinky.
I had to figure that out on my own. You know what I mean? And that's the whole purpose of this, is like that. You know how long it took me to just sit there and like flub a note and be like, why is that? Why every time when I hit with this finger, is it falling behind, or is this one too far ahead? It's because they're different lengths.
Yeah.
You have to make up for that on your own.
Yeah, a big part of my private instruction is showing people how to, like, regardless of their anatomy, is to kind of compensate for, regardless of their hand shape. Like, look, dude, I'm 5.5 feet tall. I don't have big hands, but it doesn't matter. I play bass. I play upright bass, whatever. I think anyone's anatomy can be adjusted slightly to be able to do these things. And I always bring that message of optimism to people who are like, especially with like slap stuff and stuff like that. Like, oh, my thumb is shaped weird. I go like, dude, I have like a little itty thumb. Like, I think it's just, there are a lot of things that people it's details, it's little details. And I think that that's important because I think as much as the internet's awesome, we also have done this culture of where like, oh, well, there's a video, go figure it out. But, you know, first time I studied with Matthew Garrison, he taught me a lot of things in person, whereas like little nuances with that. But I'm not trying to deviate too long. The second thing is, and it's tied to that, with my left hand. And it's really one finger per fret for everything, doing scale exercises, and trying to eliminate finger flare.
And finger what?
So like when you're doing certain scales, just when we're starting to develop left hand technique, like just by the nature of how our tendons work, like we have like a finger that will flare out. Like we have pinky flare.
Oh, finger flare, yeah. A finger
Yeah.
flare.
Yeah, exactly. So I try to reduce it as much as I can. I'm not saying that I'm perfect at it. And I don't think anyone is. I've seen Anthony Jackson and Victor wouldn't have finger flare. But the difference is the purpose is that you always have one finger per fret. And that if you do a complicated motion, you don't have a finger that flares out. Like you ever have an introductory.
Right. I call that staying at attention.
That's a good way of putting it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed that, like, especially in the beginning, like if I would hit with one finger, right, all the others would go out. That's a very common thing, right? Or people like will completely throw the pinky out, you know, like really far. And as I got better at things, I was like, well, why is this guy faster? You know, why can he hit that riff faster? And then it's like, well, my hand looks like I'm playing whack-a-mole, and his hand
is calm.
Looks like that. It just,
like if you see like a perfect example, it's not a bass player, but like Guthrie Govan, his left hand is just like smooth as silk. It looks like he's barely moving. And what it is, basically, there's just a lot of scale exercises, a lot of.
Dude, listen, guys, everybody, tone is so important. You have to understand. You have to understand what good tone is. About that, I think the reason why I bought my first Ibanez off this kid for $100 is a lot of the bass players that I listened to, they played two companies at that time. It was mainly either Ibanez or it was Fernandez.
Mm-hmm.
Those two companies were like rocking 90s rock and roll. And it was just always this thing that I heard in the street, like, oh, if you want an Ibanez, if you get yourself an Ibanez, man, you won't be upset. You won't be upset. Like they had this great reputation for an inexpensive, awesome bass.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't always look great. They didn't always have like the coolest cuts and whatever on all their basses. They were kind of round and like, but they were known to be reliable most of the time, you know, like, and a decent price. And that's also probably why I play with a pick, not just because I also play guitar, but all the bands I listen to, again, I grew up listening to a lot of industrial music.
Mm-hmm.
They all used picks, right? And you were into Clutch at the time.
Yeah.
What other bands are you into? Did you like start learning and adapting that style from like, once you had to learn the stuff for these songs, did you learn like songs that you liked and try and emulate certain tones from certain bands?
I was a workhorse because I got thrown into the fire and I had to maintain this, knowing the songs. Then as soon as we got those songs down, there was new songs to learn. Plus I was working on my stage presence. I mean, I was really working on all of this stuff at once. So I had no time to learn theory, learn anything but, the numbers of the frets, And so after that band, I went straight into another band where I was a co.
How was your bass tone in the first band?
Horrible as far as I'm concerned, because I would never have had that tone now. If I would have if I could go back and learn about tone, I wouldn't have had that tone. But that tone was chosen by the guitar player of the band.
That'll happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Bass players get bullied.
Yeah, if you don't if you don't know about your tone, they're gonna tell you about your tone. So
yep. Bass players definitely get bullied in practice. They get bullied on the stage. Now here's
Yeah.
a big thing. Most people think, and we all think so too, like so much of the best part of the bass as an instrument is the bass frequency, that low end. But if you
Yeah.
don't have your tone set up right, where
Yeah.
your low ends with your highs with your mids, if you don't have those tones EQ'd out right, you're going to get told to turn down every time. If you're
Every
only
time.
boosting those frequencies that rumble people's guts and not anything above that where they can hear it too, you're just always going to be told to turn down. And so you can turn down those rumbling shit frequencies that are great for your subwoofer, not for the stage, right? And um you turn them down with EQs and you boost up those higher lows,
Yeah.
right? Those low mids
Yeah, and you cut
area, and then
through.
you can get some of that stuff where you can
Yeah.
hear it and feel it.
Hmm.
And and for me playing with the pick, that high end noise is so important. That string twang for me,
Yeah.
opposite of you, right,
Yeah.
is it's so important that I get it, that even um if I have old strings on, I have to try and like boost that signal a little bit in the EQ so that way I can keep that tone.
Yeah, that it's just such a tone is such a crazy concept if you don't know anything about it, right? And tone comes from everything. It comes from your instrument, it comes from your gear, it comes from your fingers, it comes from how you play, it comes from your fingernails, especially if you're playing with your fingers. If your fingernails are not cut, you're going to hear that on the bass string.
Can you
And the
repeat that? Can
strings.
you repeat that? I'd like you to say that one more time. Because
So
no, because this is we've never touched on this and I can't believe it, but I yeah, please say
yeah.
that again. I like this.
Tone comes from everything. It doesn't just come from the knobs on your on your rig. It comes from the instrument you play. It comes from the rig. It comes from your fingers. It comes from your strings. It comes from your fingernails. It comes from how you play it. All of your attack. If you play with a pick, everything in your tone comes from you in your personal choices, in your gear and how you play.
Yeah, that's right around somewhere, I think like 2012, 2011, 2012 is when I started working with WB Gear and
Yeah.
started and learned about you, and because you handle everything like personally yourself with that, and that's always
Yeah.
been so awesome of you,
Yeah.
to put so much extra work on top of
Yeah.
all this other stuff, right? So you're
Yeah. A lot of people don't realize like the WB gear thing. That's my side gig. This is my main gig is working with bands and touring with bands. That's where I make my my bulk of my income. But the WB gear thing's a side thing, and it's been great. It's
so good. It's
I
so
get
good.
to it works because I'm on these stages and I'm always meeting new artists like you, and from there,
And
being
you
able
take care
to
of a lot of people,
yeah,
man.
yeah.
You guys take care of a lot of people. I've
We've
been
been very
nothing but
fortunate.
grateful.
Yeah.
I've been
Yeah,
nothing but
and
grateful.
yeah, and it's there. It's like look. Currently, we work with 10 brands. If you want to use them, they're there. If you don't, cool. Support the ones you use, and that's what we tell artists. And of course, you have to qualify at a certain level. We don't just hand out everything. You got to be doing something. You got to be active. You got to have some social media presence.
For sure, but all you got to do is be active in the right
Yeah,
ways, because I'll
yeah,
tell you, like, I wasn't a touring artist like I am now at that
no.
time. You know what I mean? Like, I was doing stuff, I was hustling, and
But you were hustling. You were posting things. You were making posts. You were interacting with people. So that's a giant part of it. You've got somewhat of a following on your social media. I love some of these dudes, they'll message me and they got like 100 people following them and they nothing on their social media, and then they get offended because it's hard for me to justify for these brands to justify doing things.
well, all these brands are really generous too. Like, there's
Yeah,
some really awesome discounts. I can't afford
yeah,
everything, my
yeah,
wish list is super long,
yeah,
like every musician, but
yeah,
yeah, dude, I'll tell you, getting guitar picks with my name on it, right? And it was because of In Tune with
yeah.
WB Gear. That was like the first moment in all those
Oh yeah,
years where I was like, I got this first bag of picks and I was like, I made it.
dude, I
Like,
know it's
I
like the
swear
coolest
to
thing.
God, man.
That's been one of the funnest aspects of the job is being able to, help artists give them their custom pick, or SIT strings and gauges in their sizes, or
Yeah.
oh man, I used to have to buy 2 packs because I'd only like to use this, and I'd only like to use these ones out of this pack, and then I'd waste. Yeah, that's been one of the coolest parts about it. Yeah,
I've been a string whore my whole life in that regard. It's always been, playing extended range instruments,
yeah,
in crazy tunings in the way music is nowadays.
yeah,
Um, yeah, you always sometimes you need like a super thick B string or
yeah.
super, thick G string because you tune down for this one song, this one time.